September meeting of the Maumelle Planning Commission. Let's see, Mr. Lyon and Mr. Drummer, what are our announcements today?
Okay, so announcements. We have 2 CCA replats ready to file. These were ones approved back last October. We have 2 new CCA replats that are staff review. And we have 3 plats were filed since the last meeting. Osage Terrace replat, lots 107 and 108, that was approved previously. Osage Hills replat, that was the one from last month. And Headley Heights was also filed. With that said, also just for future notes, just for anyone listening, with Thanksgiving being the 4th Thursday of the month, the November meeting is moved up to the 3rd Thursday. Application deadline in that case will then be basically on the meeting date for October. And then we are asking for possibly a motion to have the subcommittee meeting moved from the 2nd Tuesday of November to the second Thursday to the 1st Thursday, excuse me. And that's all the announcements.
We need a motion on moving both meetings.
I believe we dealt with the actual meeting being the 3rd Thursday. I think that's dealt with usually at the beginning of the year when we consider.
It's already on the schedule.
We've done that for Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving and Christmas. That's the typical procedure anyway, but, well, that will have to be handled in the public hearing. Move on to approval of the minutes. You've all been provided a copy of August minutes. Does anybody have any changes?
Motion to approve minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor, yes?
Yes.
Those opposed, no. All right, minutes are approved. I have no public comments on non-agenda items. We'll open the public hearing, and before we get into old business, would anybody like to add consideration of a motion for moving subcommittee in November? So moved. Do we have a
Second.
I have a motion to move the subcommittee meeting for the month of November from the 2nd Thursday of the month to the 1st Thursday of the month. Also have a second. Those in favor, yes?
Yes.
Those opposed, no. All right.
I have a comment, Mr. Chair, on that. I'd just like to give some latitude to staff. Usually that's a pretty light month. It usually doesn't end up being heavy, and, you know, if the applications are light, I'm out of town. I'm gonna miss the whole thing, both subcommittee. So, you know, it's tough. It's tough. So, you know, if they can slide around and applications can slide around, you know, give them a little latitude. I think this is just ask the applicants if it's nothing particularly pressing. But of course, we're here to work with the community the best we can.
We shouldn't sacrifice thoroughness, though.
Absolutely.
I will concur, Commissioner Johnson. All right, moving into old business. Item number 1, Stone Canyon Edition PRD. You have a preliminary development plan and a proposed preliminary plat. Staff report, please.
Mr. Chair, I provided you an updated staff report. This staff report includes public comments that have come in since the last staff report was put out, but it also modifies staff recommendations, which in the first report I did not include the contingencies that staff needed on the approvals, so I provided that on the recommendations that I handed out. Everything else is the same. So, Mr. Chair, the proposed development is located in the county in newly annexed land along Highway 365 and Old Maumelle Road. It contains 86 acres, of which approximately 28 acres, 32.5% is dedicated to open space, common area for trails and drainage systems, leaving approximately 60 acres for housing development, streets, and drainage. They're proposing a mixture of 257 detached single-family residential homes, which is about 63.1% of the housing, and 150 attached single-family townhomes, which is about 36.9% of the housing. The overall intent of the proposal appears to meet the intent of Section 94-443, which states to most effectively utilize land areas in the city which have characteristics such as steep slopes, floodplain proximity, river view, and the like, which makes conventional platting and rigid bulk and area requirements of zoning difficult to apply, to encourage a variety of flexibility in land development and land use in the zone that will be predominantly residential, and then to maximize the enhancement of and minimize the disruption of existing natural features and amenities found in the PRD sites. And number 3 is one of the main ones for the request because the applicant is proposing to preserve an existing quarry area within the site, which is approximately 11 acres of public, to provide public trail systems, which is to be maintained by the neighborhood POA. The proposed trail system utilizes existing terrain and features, which proposed trail connections along the railroad for adjacent properties to connect in and potentially increase regional trail connectivity. The proposed development improvements indicate potential mitigation of existing storm flooding to adjacent areas to the east. The applicant has indicated that in R1, they would be allowed up to 510 units per gross acre by right, but this was incorrect when stated. The R1 allows up to 3 units per acre, gross acre by right, which would be approximately 260 units. Now, the R1 does allow an increase in density by conditional use up to 6 units per acre, which would be 0 lot line, and that would be approximately 510 units, which is what the applicant was referring to. The proposed development mixes single-family detached with single-family attached to achieve a density of 4.67 units per gross acre. This is slightly higher than what is allowed by right in an R1 zone, but significantly under medium-density R2 zoning, which does allow up to 16 units per acre. The applicant has indicated by doing this preserves the 11 acres in the center of the development for an open space trailhead for public use, which otherwise would be lost if they had to comply to R1 requirements. When looking at comparisons around Maumelle, Diamond Point Addition on the opposite side of the railroad tracks from this development was built as a single-family detached subdivision at a density of approximately 3.67 units per acre. Of course, they're proposing on this one 5.41 gross units per acre. The city also approved a single-family detached development in the town center Carnahan Village, which was built at approximately 4.28 units per acre. So for context, if you took that Carnahan Village, single-family, and it was combined with the villas at Audubon, just adjacent to it, which is a townhome development on its southern boundary, and is also built at 11 units per acre, it would bring both combined to 7 units per acre, of course, which exceeds the proposed here. If Stone Canyon were built to 7 units, then you'd be looking at approximately 602 units for the project, and that's not what's being proposed here. They're proposing 407. A traffic impact review for Stone Canyon Addition by TEC engineers was provided and found the proposed development would be expected to generate a total of 2,993 vehicle trips per day, with 200 trips occurring during the AM peak hour and 235 trips occurring during the PM peak hour. It is estimated that 1,510 of those trips would enter or exit at the Stone Canyon Drive, which would be at Highway 365, and 1,400 trips would enter or exit the site via Red Rock Loop, which would be on Old Maumelle Road. As a result, both of those proposed roads fall within the acceptable range of up to 2,500 average daily trips for a Class 6 local street urban residential. And if you recall, there was conversation by staff whether or not if those residential roads in the development needed to be either a collector standard or a residential. So now that confirmed that a local standard is sufficient and is what's proposed. They also have increased the width of the road at the intersection of 365 just to provide additional turn lane as needed. Police and Fire and Sanitation have, Highway 365 average daily trip count at this site location provided by RDOT shows 4,500 average daily trips a day. So this portion of Highway 365 gets about 4,500. Now in comparison, when you get up to the 4-lane road in the commercial area, of course those trips are 22,000 because they're receiving all the traffic from Maumelle going through there during rush hour. But this one is only at 4,500. And when you look at the average trips, which is provided in the traffic review by them, you can see that this is on the low side. It did peak up around 5,000, 5,500, but that was back in 2015. So Highway 365 is a two-lane arterial highway maintained by RDOT, which typically does not consider widening improvements until a road reaches between 12,000 and 18,000 average trips per day. And that was information obtained from other engineers that deal with RDOT on road construction. And those numbers are based on various factors like curb cuts and distances between and whatnot. So this means that the current road, Highway 365, should be sufficient to handle the increased volume from the proposed development. Police, fire, and sanitation have indicated they can serve this area sufficiently. Considering the strategic plan for the city as a guide, it shows medium density for the area, so the proposed development would be in keeping with that guide if used, but do keep in mind that that plan has been considered outdated. Other comments, the fire department has been satisfied. Public Works is satisfied. One of the things that has come up since last month is that we did determine, after speaking with the city engineer and Public Works, that a half-road improvement would be required for the portion of Old Maumelle Road abutting this property at the time of the time of Phase 4 construction of improvements. So that would just be half-road to the center line of the street. It would not include the half improvement on the other side of the street, but it would be just for this section abutting Old Maumelle Road. Entergy, there was no comments that came in. CAW provided comments concerning the sizing of their utilities, as well as North Little Rock wastewater needed plans information. The county's comments have been addressed, and then city planning staff comments have been provided. The one thing to note concerning the staff comments, we did provide you one item, the comment concerning 94-452, statement of the applicant's intentions with regard to the future selling or leasing of all or portions of the planned unit development, as well as 1A, a statement describing the character of the development, including the rationale behind the assumptions. So we did not have that at the time whenever my recommendation, and we put the staff report out. One of the reasons why I provided a recommendation for a due pass is because the applicant has provided what has always been provided to Planning Commission in the city when it comes to a PRD development plan. I've been asking for more commentary to provide information concerning these, just because of the situation that happened with the Cypress Bend development, where there was not clarity on the types of development. So with that, the applicant this week did provide some commentary. I provided that in front of you. It's called the Stone Canyon Addition subdivision. Of course, it was not in the packet, but they were trying to provide some commentary, and of course, this is kind of a simplified version. It does provide answers to some of the questions concerning those two statements, and that is deals with ownership. He did state that consisting of both individually owned single-family and individually owned attached townhomes. He also stated in there that the housing units will be clustered to create more green spaces, and then also all detached and attached homes are to be built with 100% quality materials as defined by Maumelle City Code. And then the homes are to utilize a mix of styles and materials to create a diversified aesthetic within the development. So if anything, that does provide some context that it's not going to be homogeneous type housing. They are looking for some diversity within the overall design concept. They provided their minimum square footages that they're requesting on the development at 1,200 square feet minimums, and then the townhomes are 1,200 square feet minimums. So just wanted to point that out to you. There are no variances or waivers on this, and in the updated staff report, you'll find that I provided staff recommendations I added the contingencies that we're requesting, so staff does recommend, I'm sorry, it's not approval. Staff recommends a do pass recommendation to City Council on the proposed preliminary development plan and approval of the preliminary plat for Stone Canyon subdivision contingent on meeting all staff, city engineer, and planning commissioner comments, and contingent on annexation of county portions into the city of Maumelle and all portions being zoned PRD and land use of SUR. Now, I will state that there were some comments and concerns about what comes first, the annexation and zoning, and then the development plan. I think that came up the last time. I would like to state that the developer who is making the proposal is looking for the entitlements, that they can actually develop the land. If they can't develop it to this subdivision, then there's no interest in purchasing the land, which means there's no interest to annex or to rezone. So you can look at it similar to Tractor Supply. They needed certain entitlements before they could close on the land and come to the city of Maumelle. Most developments require certain entitlements be provided before they move forward with the development. So I just want to point that out, the timing, which is why we have the contingencies on the development plan based on annexation and zoning. And then you'll also have comments on the development plan that refers back to the city having review of city plans, the civil engineer plans, so that if it does not annex in, then it goes back through the planning process. And that concludes staff comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drummer. Madam City Attorney, do you concur with the proposed contingencies on annexation and zoning?
Well, it will have to be contingent on the zoning. So when you say, do I agree that it'll have to be contingent on the
Do you
zoning?
agree that, well, I mean, obviously we don't have to include that in our motion, but would you recommend that this be done contingent upon zoning and annexation of appropriate zoning?
Yes, I mean, we can't approve a preliminary development plan for a zone that it's not, you don't have a preliminary development plan requirement for. Another thing that I wanted to ask is just that when the proposed, the preliminary development plan goes to the council, I would like for us to include all of the documents that state the minimum square footages, the green space and the townhome portions and all that, because I believe that is part of the preliminary development plan. I just want to be clear that that's what the council is passing as well.
And I will clarify as well, which I did provide in front of you, there was some elevations that were provided last month. They did not send them in the physical packets. It was included in the digital packet that went out, but not in your packet you received. And the reasons being is that those were more for context at the time, being that they have the written document that they provided that I'm asking to be placed with the development plan as commentary and the intent of the development. And since they have quality materials and craftsmanship within that context, I think that they're asking for flexibility within the design, and they don't want to be stuck with a certain townhome design so that they can meet that. This is more of just a typical standard townhome design, sixplex, which is the maximum that you can go on a townhome style. So just pointing that out as far as what to be included, unless the commission prefers to have that included in there.
I think I'd favor passing on as much information to council as we can so they can make a fully informed decision. And if the owner or the developer is going to ask for some flexibility, that's something that council needs to consider, needs to at least have the ability to consider.
I want to make sure I'm clear. Are you asking, we got this as a separate, it wasn't included. These notes are not included in the development plan. Are you requesting the applicant to place these notes as part of the development plan that is submitted?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. So they'll be incorporated into the development plan notes when it goes to
Yes, sir.
to the council. Okay. I've got a question. So if I understood you correctly, and I think you did clarify this, the question I had. So we got half-street improvements will be planned on what is called Old Maumelle Road at the completion of that last phase. I think that's where they currently have it.
That's correct.
That's correct. So that road is currently not in the city, is not currently in the city limits, but that would be ETJ.
No, actually it is. So so that portion of the Bradley property was annexed in last year. And with that, we received, full ownership of that portion of the road that abuts that property. So
So
that is,
I'm sorry, Scott, go ahead.
so that is currently inside the city of Maumelle, the entire road.
So that right-of-way, that 50-foot right-of-way, if it stays Class 6, is within the city limits of Maumelle.
Yes, sir.
So, trip generation is just for site plan specific, so, the development. My concern is that as time goes on, more than likely, the development on the east will give way to more dense development. There might be some resistance to that, and I know we've had public comment at other meetings, but not tonight, or maybe yet to be heard. So, you've got 60% of the trip generation on the development on Stone Canyon at the Class 6 collector. If that goes denser, if that eventually goes denser, comparable, or R1, you will exceed the 2,500 trip. So, more than likely, you will. I think that I'm pretty confident in saying that. So, although there's not been a trip generation of what is to come, but if it develops similar in residential, it will. So what I'm asking from staff is that, we need to keep that in mind moving forward, and perhaps, we dedicate more right-of-way. I don't know if the applicant is if that goes, we may need a higher classification road there. It may force us into more of a collector standard as that area east of Old Maumelle develops.
And I know that I discussed that with the applicant at the time.
Go ahead, Eric, if you, I caught y'all cold on this a little bit.
No, you're
I don't
fine.
know,
You're
so-
fine. Eric Holloway, 116 Timberland Trail. It's actually already a 60-foot right-of-way.
Okay.
I don't think we have any problem if that can be shown to be an issue. We're actually working on a development plan for lands that are east of the church there, but they don't attach to Old Maumelle. They come out right across the street from Stonebrook. That may or may not come to pass, but as you know, we have a big drain that comes through that property, so it kind of separates most of the lands away from Old Maumelle. So you're not really gonna see much attachment. There's probably only 4 or 5 acres that will actually feed towards Old Maumelle from the east. But it's already a 60-foot right-of-way. We don't have a problem with it. It's really not that big of a problem to do a little bit extra widening to accommodate.
I thought it was 50.
It does state 50 on the development plan, so, if that's the case, we want to upgrade it to a 60-foot collector, then it needs to be accounted for on the plan.
Yeah, we only own 30 feet from or I think our current owner is only 30 feet from the center line of Old Maumelle. So it's a 60-foot right-of-way as it exists today.
Okay.
Right, whoever's bringing on the east side would have to, I just think we need that, I would be more comfortable with that flexibility.
Sure.
And how routing traffic.
Yeah, that's certainly not a problem.
The other question I have is on the master street plan, how are we handling the railroad crossing? Does it just stop going south?
Yes, sir.
So there's no
There's no
plan-
crossing
There's
whatsoever.
no planned connection there currently on the master street plan?
No, sir.
Nor will there ever be, as
No.
far as I know.
Okay, thank you.
No, not without going vertical.
Right, correct. Well, I look at that woodland edge going south, and without, of course, the city or someone paying for that, whoever it is, that, they'll go north, I think, more than likely, instead of come out to the boulevard, when the time comes. So, that's all, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Lance?
Yes, I have questions about the traffic report. Who should I address those to the director or the writer of the report?
It's probably the applicant, Mr. Andrews.
Roy Andrews, 3 Monarch Drive. I don't know that I can answer your questions, but I will get you answers.
All right, thank you. On the back of your cover letter, you said that the acceptable range in this area was 0 to 2,500 ADT. What was the source? Was that ITE? Was that your source?
So 0 to 2,500 is on our master street plan for a local road. That's the
Okay.
maximum that you can go up
So
to.
this our street plan?
Yes.
Okay, so could you help me understand then, on the front of this, you said the average daily trips, and by the way, I think it's great to have a traffic analysis, and we should require it for any major project, so thank you for doing this.
on the first page, you say the average daily trips in this vicinity are 4,200. And so how do you reconcile that then with an acceptable range of 0 to 2,500 and the additional 2,993 trips? I mean, the language is the same. You're talking about average daily trips. And if the standard is not above 2,500 on the front page, and RDOT agrees that the average daily trips are already 4,500, and then you're adding in almost 3,000. I could be reading this wrong, but I certainly don't understand it and would like an explanation, please.
Well, so, and I guess I'll try to, from my reading and I hope I answer your question correctly, the average daily trips for Highway 365 right now, as RDOT has stated, is, well, it's 4,500.
4,500, okay.
Now, it says 4,200 on here. I was under the impression it was 45.
Which number should we use, 42 or 45?
Well, I can tell you right now, it's,
I don't think it makes that much difference, but.
no, but it is 4,500.
Okay, so if that's 4,500, are we talking about the same item that we're measuring when we're saying the acceptable range is under 2,500, and then we're
So-
adding an additional 3,000
No,
trips?
so let me clarify that. So the 4,500 is on Highway 365.
Okay.
Under 2,500 is what would be required for the residential local roads inside this development, not on Highway 365. So he estimated that the total average trips in total was about 3,000, but it's split. So half of that is roughly going, or 60% is going one way, 40% another way. So the traffic patterns show that all the roads inside this development are under 2,500. Now, in total, when all those dump out, or when those trips go to Highway 365, which is not the full 2,500, it's to and from, then you're increasing the 4,500, which is on Highway 365, to an additional number. But that's not really what's in question here. We're not looking at the volumes on Highway 365. We're looking at the volumes inside this development, which meets.
But he also stated that the highway department would not look at doing anything until they hit 12,000 to 18,000. So
Right.
we're well within
Right.
highway department's acceptable range.
Well, then, my follow-up question would be then, on your summary, when you're saying that the trip generation from the project is 2,993, that number from the project is greater than the standard to 2,500.
But it's split.
It's split with the
Yeah, down at
two
the third,
outlets.
Ms. Landis, if you look down, 1483 is exiting Red Rock Loop, which is east, going onto Old Mall Mill. He didn't say that, but that's where Red Rock exits. So 1483 of the 2993 vehicle trips are exiting to the east onto Old Mall Mill, with 1510 going to 365.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And then my follow-up question is, of the 1,483 trips that are gonna go Red Rock Loop, they're going onto a road that up north we call two-track, Old Maumelle Road, because two-track, that's where your Jeep wheels can fit in. And how will we make sure there's a safe environment for almost 1,500 trips a day going onto this road? And we've heard there's going to be something where there can be improvements to half. Who's going to pay the other half of the improvements? Are we going to force property owners that aren't developing their land to pay for road improvements for another project?
At one time, Old Mall Mill was the main entrance into Mall Mill. It's an asphalt road that has been chip sealed over the years. It's in great shape. Approximately 26 feet wide with pavement. So it would meet the acceptable traffic that's going to be on that. It's a good road. and down to
but
the
there's
end of our
talk-
development.
If you're talking about improvements to half, which, you know, there's two ways that could be done. One would be ludicrous, and that's for the developer to improve half the road, and the way that would make sense is that they would pay in to improve a half. Who's going to pay for the other half? It will be the taxpayers, or will it be the property owners in that road? And then that may not be a question to you, I guess it's a question to the director.
Well, so we had that conversation, and one of the comments that came from the applicant was that which they said they're fine with doing a half-road improvement, but because the creek cuts off most of the land, you're only gonna see about 4 to 5 acres of development on the other side. The development may be so small that they may not be able to afford a half-road improvement on their half, which is why they suggested that it may be better to pay in an in lieu fee instead of doing a half road. But from our standpoint, we don't necessarily have that set up as a means, so putting the half road requirement on there is necessary, but it would have to be improved as other developments are done. But there would be no requirement of existing landowners to make improvements unless new development.
Follow-up question to Scott, either to you or possibly Madam City Attorney. So the half street improvements, as I understand, will be required in phase 4, which is certainly some time away. Is the requirements of those, I mean, or is it set in stone that as of the approval of this development plan, that once they hit phase 4, they have to do the half street improvements, or could an amendment to the code sometime between now and then, you know, change their requirements or give them the option to pay into a fund between now and then? I mean, what's the triggering event?
I mean, I would be fine with the commissioners having a contingency in there that leave it to the city engineer and the city to make that determination at the time when it comes around.
I mean, I'm not, you know, if that's within our authority to do so, but if an amendment to the code is written to give that option between now and phase 4, do they get to take advantage of what happens after that done, before construction starts, or are they locked into what they have to do as of approval of this?
I would probably lock them in now, and if they need to come back for a variance later, whenever that phase comes, it's gonna be a few years down the road, and they can bring it back in front of planning commission. They would have time to do that. I don't see a problem with that, but.
Well, yeah, if there's an option for.
Well, the half-street improvements, although whether you like it or not, it's just per code.
Sure.
So, I mean, to obligate or to require, in the 4th phase, it may be 3 or 4 years down the road, it seems like we're putting, you know, we don't have any precedence of placing that burden on the developer of seeing that type of crystal ball.
Yeah.
We haven't done it in the past, and we have required half-street improvements. One thing comes to mind is the Holiday Inn up there that has like ADT at 10. We required them to do the half-street improvements, so, because it was in code, and he was required, and he was in the ETJ at the time, so we have required it on the other side as well, too.
I know,
Yes, we have, we've required that on Smalling Road,
Yeah, there's others, you're right, Mike.
Lee Carey's development over there.
Yep.
And as far as I know, there's been no other improvements on the other half. We required it down where on Crystal Hill. That was required, and, you know, they're doing something to it now, but, you know, it hadn't been for a long time, so, no, there's precedent set that we require half-street improvements. Now, whether the other half gets improved or not,
Yeah. And the applicant makes a good point on the 4 to 5 acres. I didn't even think about that. I didn't dig into that. And with the trip generation, if it truly is the 4 to 5 acres that ends up getting developed, I don't know where you're gonna put all that traffic to the east, per se, but, you know, you probably wouldn't exceed the 2,500 at the time, so.
And I'll also point out that they're presenting this as a phased development, so if this is approved by city council, then they will not come back to planning commission. Staff will approve the phased final plats as they come forward, as long as they substantially are in compliance with the development plan.
I have a question then, so how is it that we make sure that in the future, in phase 4, when it gets developed, regardless of who owns the land, there's some requirement when building permits come in or when plans are approved, that someone pays their share of what needs to happen to that road? I mean, we've got to make sure that the developer who profits from this pays for their responsibility and the taxpayer does not.
That's just code that has to approve.
Our code currently right now obligates a half-road street improvement to that developer.
Okay, that's the code, then we don't have to worry about putting it as a condition, correct?
No, it's by code.
Thank you,
And
you've been real helpful.
your planning and codes department is real good about making sure we comply with that.
even though some of those half-street improvements don't make a hell of a lot of sense.
Well, that was a reason, one of the reasons we suggested an in lieu, because if you look at if you've been out there and driven this area, and you look, if we improve our side, it's not gonna fit with the nature of the rest of that street or road, and it's actually gonna look out of place for potentially 10 years, or however long it takes for the rest of that to develop, but.
I think for this, I mean, let's take the path that's provided for by code.
That's
And then
right.
in 3 years or 4 years, we could address that at that
Yeah.
point in time. You know, if you wanna come back and ask for a variance if something else makes a little bit more sense, that seems to be the appropriate time to do it.
Okay.
Further discussion?
Just, on the bill of assurance, I guess, is this just a placeholder, because it's not, so we have notes that say a certain square footage requirements, and then the bill of assurance has different ones.
We will get that cleaned up, per the
Okay.
comments.
And then I see, like, the plan itself, the notes discuss a property owners association, but the bill of assurance
Yeah.
discusses a improvement district.
It'll be an improvement district to take care of that.
Okay. So that,
We'll get that cleaned up.
so will the notes on the development plan change?
But yes, they will.
And that was part of staff comments under the first item, number 2, pertaining to the bill of assurance, showing that the inconsistency. So that will have to be done before the final plating.
Further discussion? Hearing none, does anyone have a motion on the preliminary development plan?
Or here, do we have, yeah, these are separate, I'm sorry. I make a motion, Mr. Chair, I make a motion to propose a preliminary development plan for Stone Canyon Addition PRD, for, the applicant of, well, the representative of Holloway Engineering, I forget who the applicant is, it's not on here, for the preliminary development plan, pending any other commissioner or, staff comments. Accent Development Group.
Yes.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Those in favor, yes?
Yes.
Those no? Motion is approved. Moving on to the proposed preliminary plat. Is there a further staff report?
No, sir, Mr. Chair.
All right. Any discussion on the proposed preliminary plat? Does anyone have a motion?
Good gravy, good motion. I'll make a motion to propose the preliminary plat for the Stone Canyon Addition PRT for this Accent Development Group LLC, pending any other commissioner or staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Stage fright.
Those in favor, yes?
Yes.
Those no? All right. Motion is approved.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 2 of old business, the proposed code amendment to section 54-78. Staff report, please.
So, Mr. Chair, if you recall, this was, of course, last month. We pulled it out because of inconsistencies that we had. We made those modifications and provided the proposed code amendment clarifies the language on the initiator of land use amendments and clarifies that rezoning and land use amendments on the same property can be heard on the same agenda with the land use amendment shall be heard first while following all legal notice requirements. The amendment finally adjusts the applicant submission deadlines to align with Planning Commission bylaws. Staff recommends a do pass recommendation to City Council for the code amendment contingent on meeting all staff and Planning Commissioner comments.
Thank you, Mr. Trevor. Any discussion from the commission? Does anyone have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion for a due pass to the City Council for an amendment to ordinance section 54-78, subject to any staff or commission recommendations.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor, yes?
Yes.
Those opposed, no. We will issue a due pass recommendation. Moving on to new business, item number 1, the proposed code amendment to section 94-9. Staff report, please.
Mr. Chair, this item conforms with the land use that you just passed, also dealing with making alignments with Planning Commission timelines for application submissions, while removing confusion on the deadlines required for application submissions. Staff recommends a do pass recommendation to City Council for the code amendment contingent on meeting all staff and planning commissioner comments.
Thank you, Mr. Cromer. Any discussion from the commission?
This promotes consistency with bylaws, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Does anyone have a motion?
I'll make a do pass motion, recommendation to the city council for code amendment, 94-9, pending any staff or commissioners' comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor, yes? Yes. Those opposed, no. Motion is approved. Moving on to new business item number 2, the master street plan amendment. Staff report, please.
Mr. Chair, the Master Street Plan Amendment is presented after staff meetings with county and property owner representatives. The discussion around the minor arterial link to Highway 365, MacArthur Drive, was the main topic, and it was recommended the link be shifted south to a more appropriate placement for an above-grade crossing of the railroad. The current location would not allow an above-grade crossing without requiring a large amount of property acquisition and potential damage to the Oak Grove Community Commercial Area. Moving the minor arterial link towards Trap Road intersection would allow the above-grade crossing without excess property acquisition as well as the topography issues. Staff recommends a do pass recommendation to City Council for the amendment to the master street plan contingent on meeting all staff and planning commissioner comments.
Thank you, Mr. Cromer. Any discussion from the commission? Does anyone have a motion?
I recommend a do pass recommendation to the city council for the changes in language for 54-110 as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor, yes?
Yes.
Those opposed, no. All right, motion is approved. Close the public hearing. We will move on to liaison reports. September 6th was mine. Issues regarding the planning commission. There was a resolution 2022-40 approving the preliminary development plan for phase 1 and 2 of Cypress Bend. That passed. Ordinances 1071 and 1072 regarding the changes to the land use plan and zoning map for the Tri-Evictus Pfeiffer property. Those were on second reading. There was a resolution 2022-41 which passed, which gave the city the right to purchase property for the White Oak Crossing roundabout. Timeline for that's kind of a to be determined based on the state bidding approval and relocation of the utility. Moving on to ordinances 1073 and 1074 regarding the land use plan and zoning map changes for the in-city limits portion of Stone Canyon. Those were on first reading. Ordinance 1075 regarding the amendment to Code Section 94-101. That was on first reading, and that was all pertaining to Planning Commission. September 19th, Commissioner Ramsey.
Ordinance 1071 and 1072, it passed, but it was 2 no votes, but 2 were also absent. So the mayor had to break the tie and voted yes on both of those. That's it.
All right. Assignments for October 3rd, Commissioner Johnson, and October 17th, Commissioner Landis. Does anyone have anything further?
Mr. Chair, if I just, and one thing I failed to share with you during the Stone Canyon, I just want to let you know, I put on in front of you, it wasn't really part of your packet, but the North Maumelle small area plan provided to each commissioner just for context. That was something that was done a couple of years ago to help give some vision for the businesses. It was in collaboration with the businesses and landowners in North Maumelle. I think that was referred to by some of the commentary that came in from public comment. So something to keep in mind as you're looking at future planning commission meetings, if we're ever dealing with anything in North Maumelle. That's something that we would like to kind of refer to in context, dealing with the future of that area. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Are you anticipating something, Mr. Groen?
Well, no, sir, but I don't know. Things are always coming in, so we just want to be, actually, yes.
I think your facial expressions betray you.
Well,
I was about to say the same
Did-
thing.
And not a good
Just,
player.
No.
just put it in front of us.
well, I think we
Just
had,
for
I think we
person.
had it in staff comments. I don't know if we have or not. We have a staff review, site plan review of a small little coffee kiosk, type development up there, so it's helping to move things forward.
Second.
Motion, multiple seconds. Those in favor, yes?
Yes.